All right, welcome Monday morning to podcast, Teaching Others What I Need to Learn. I'm your host, Scott Engler, a published author and LinkedIn specialist on professional branding, networking strategies for finding the next job or career path that you love. Also help with business development. Basically, everything I do is geared towards helping other people being the most successful they could be, doing what they're passionate and great at in either for their career or their business. And LinkedIn happens to be the specialization that I will use in a lot of cases, integrated into the coaching and consulting I do. It's not the only thing, but it's been a huge component and something that I have definitely honed a skill in over the last 5.5 years. So anyway, enough about me. Let's talk about you guys. And today's episode is how to use being an introvert or more introverted to your advantage and ace the job interview. And this is based off of an article that I wrote for recruiter.com that got a lot of attention and was really well received. And so I wanted to do a podcast on it. So, when I talk about in the article is, if you would consider yourself to be more introverted, a lot of times I'll speak to people or have clients or just job seekers that they're really talented, right? But they just, when it comes to time to get in the interview, they dread it, right? Whereas someone like me, I actually enjoy. That was like my favorite part was the job interview. Other people, they just dread it. They feel uncomfortable, they get stiff, and it sucks because, they're so talented at what they do. And I think that, when I would maybe one day in the future, I would do more performance-based coaching for hiring managers is like to find different ways to interview different types of people. And so, that being said, what I do with clients is I work with them with their strengths. So if you're more introverted and the job interview terrifies you, it's just not your strong suit, you just don't know what to say, you get stiff, and you know that you're just not putting your best foot forward, this is really the podcast for you. Now, what happens is typically with someone that's like, let's say, last week I was talking to this guy, he did like some work for aerospace, right? And he was an engineer. And but he said, he was having a lot of hard times with the job interviews because for the reasons I just explained. Or clients I've had, that were, more of the engineer type, developer, someone like that was where they got really stuck. So in these cases, my first suggestion, other than helping them get clear on what it is they want to do and what kind of company, is to showcase their work. So for someone like a software developer, a website developer, engineer, anybody that's creating something that you could see, it's a great skill to have. And my first point for these people is that they're not expected to be the face of the company. They're not expected to have the most gregarious personality. They're not necessarily going to have to be doing as much customer service oriented things or things that involve as much of a high level of like interpersonal skills for the most part, right? So that's not the main thing that they're going to be getting hired for. So the way that they could use this to their advantage, and why I think introverts have a great advantage now in the job search, or even just in the contemporary economy that we live in, is because you could showcase so much of your work. Now, the first thing that I get from a lot of people when I say this is like, oh, well, I have, these NDAs or, I can't share some of the things I've done for past companies. That's fine. In every single case, when we dig a little deeper, there's something that they could show that they've done that will be extremely relevant and pertinent to the job at hand. And so for someone as talented as these people, like, they could always make a prototype. They could always do some type of demonstration that's similar. I've never had a situation where they couldn't showcase something that was very pertinent to the job at hand. Now, from a branding standpoint and marketing, there's all sorts of great ways you could share online, with your profile, whatever kind of social media you're doing. When I'm working with people on LinkedIn, SlideShare is a great way to share a lot of the work you've done in the past, any websites you've developed, if you're like an illustrator, any illustrations you've done in the past. I work with this guy that did illustrations for children's books. So there's a whole ton of ways you could showcase yourself where you're brilliant, right? So you just think of like the artist that might not be the biggest people person, but when you see their work, right, it's just incredible. It speaks for itself. You don't need them to explain why they're good at art and how it's going to help you if you needed art for whatever reason for your company. If they're doing some type of design or whatever, it speaks for itself, right? So that being said, that's a really big relief for this type of person. And what I tell them to do is to bring in a PowerPoint or whatever, bring in the prototype, the thing that they're great at, bring that in and then talk about that. Because here's the deal. Not only what happens when someone brings in their invention, their art, their creation, whatever it is, and they start talking about it, you see them in a new light. They're not stiff. They're not uncomfortable. It's not a back and forth question. It's like they're at their highest aspect of themselves, and it's a beautiful thing to watch, right? So they really come into their own at this point. So what I tell people is, and it's fail-proof, really, is like if you're going to go for a software development job and you email the hiring manager or whoever and say, hey, by the way, I wanted to bring in something that's very similar to what you would want me to do and talk about how I created this for this other company or how this works and how I can see it working here. Do you think they're going to say, no way, please don't bring in that thing that we're going to want to hire someone to do that might solve our company problems or, be a great thing for us? Of course not. They're going to say, absolutely, please bring it in. You could even send like a teaser over or whatever. But I highly recommend that you bring that in to the interview so you could do some either type of PowerPoint. You could talk about that with them and how that would obviously be a part of what you would be doing for the company, right? Or even if for whatever reason you emailed them or sent them over something that they could look at beforehand, that might be a good idea as well. I would highly encourage you to make that the focus of the conversation, or at least bring in something, where you're ready so you could talk about that again and how that would help the company, which as I'm sure for someone that's as talented as these people that I work with are and speak to, they're going to want to talk to you about it more, right? So it's really a great way to use what you're naturally good at and talented. So when you go into that interview, it's not, the more traditional back and forth exchange interview. It's more about you showcasing your work or presenting your work and how that's going to help them and contribute to the organization. So that's really when I talk about, how to use being an introvert to your advantage and ace the job interview. That's how you do it. Because bottom line, if you go into an interview, you're showing them. I think that's even more of an advantage that you would have than someone like myself, because in a lot of cases, I'm just talking about what I've done and what I could do. But I think it is a really powerful thing to actually show people the work you've already done and how that's helped the company or how that functions. That's a powerful thing when you can demonstrate something that already operates and works, and that obviously shows your competency and how you would be able to implement something similar or even better to the organization. So that's what I got for today. If you are interested in hearing more of these things, you could follow me on YouTube. Scott Engler, Engler. You could follow me on LinkedIn, Scott Engler from Corvallis, Oregon. And until next time, take care.